It takes a seriously twisted mind to develop a world where members of a secret, underground society hunt each other for sport. Or it takes the mind of a genius with an intense imagination. Or it takes the mind of a middle school math teacher. Thankfully, our interviewee is all of those in spades. Hi, I'm your host, Garrett K. Jones, and for the July edition of Author Awareness, I'm interviewing New Jersey native Stephen J. Galgon about his book, The Circle. Hey, happy Saturday, everybody. There isn't much to say that hasn't already been said for the month of July. Last week, I covered my top 10 recommended audiobooks. Now, I forgot to mention that I myself now have an audiobook out on Audible. It's a book of poetry called The Lover, the Fighter, and the Philosopher. It was released on June 28th. And if you'd like to get yourself a free promo code, I'm giving them away to the first 20 new patrons on my Patreon. The link is down in the description. Before going any further with the video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications on new videos. You can select notifications for all videos, or you can select notifications based on your preferences. If you're watching on your phone, be sure to update those settings inside the app itself to get the most out of your viewing experience. Second, I want to share with you more details about the library book signing event at the Hanford Library. The day is July 31st. The time will be 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. So far, I don't know who the other authors are going to be, but I do know we will be answering questions about our work and signing and selling our books. While that is the date of the author showcase on YouTube, I'll also be live streaming on Instagram. My @ is down in the video description. So, all right, let's get into this. As I mentioned last week, I had Stephen on my podcast last summer to help him promote The Circle, which was still a relatively new book. I've also had the pleasure of working with him on the creative side of things when he asked me to be a beta reader for his follow-up, Legends of the Circle, which comes out later this year. But I'll let him do most of the talking. Stephen, thank you for joining me. It's great to have you on the show finally.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Good to see you again.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys just got back from California. It was kind of cool to have us both on the same coast, even though we didn't get a chance to really meet up. Hope you're surviving the flight and all that.
Yeah, we're getting by. With 3 kids running around, all jet lagged. Also, it's very different.
Yes. So we're going to talk about your writing as an author. So tell me about your work. You wrote a book, The Circle. It's become an award-winning book. You're working on the next entry in the series. Tell me about it.
Well, okay. So, as you know, The Circle has been, a story that's been going on in my mind for a very long time. It kind of originated back when I was in college and we played the game Assassins. And what ended up happening, you get a water gun and a name, and then you have to find and assassinate that person with your water gun. There wasn't a game I was very good at, but it kind of planted the seed of this story where, you are not just hunting with a water gun, you're hunting with something much more sinister. And instead of just taking the next slip of paper, you just kind of get re-rotated into this circle of assassins, essentially. And what would happen if somebody joined that circle without wanting to be a part of it, and how would they survive? And that's what The Circle's all about. And it's been, like I said, since college for me. So now at this point, more than 15 years, almost 20 years of a story, and finally came to fruition in The Circle. And it's just been received so well, and I'm really happy about that.
So the award that you won, which award was that? And how did you get signed in for that?
Okay, not a brag. I've won a few. I've been very, very grateful to have won a few. I won the NYC Big Book Award, gold medal in thrillers, and I won the gold medal for the, goodness, I'm losing it now. Hang on, I'm drawing a blank.
On the jet lag.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. It's a global ebook award in suspense. And I've gotten honorable mention and a couple of other different awards. And they're just contests for independent authors that they enter into. You're up against a lot of other independent authors, and they weed through what they get. And fortunately, the Circle was received well by a number of those. I just recently got the Literary Titan Award for the month of June. Gold medal with that as well. And it's just been, it's surreal, really. Like I said before, this is just a story that's been kicking around my head for a number of years. And the fact that I was able to put it down onto paper and then have it be received so well, not only by reviewers and just readers, but, by the awards committees that make these selections, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, so that kind of gets me into the next question. How did you get into doing writing? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or was this kind of the reaction or response that you had because you had the story in your head and you want to get it out on paper?
Yeah, it's the second part, really. I'm the last person I ever thought that was ever going to write a book. I went to film school, and when this story came to me, it was originally a screenplay or, a screenwriting assignment, to be honest with you, that kind of took off. It got a mind of its own. I graduated from school, and, I just put it on a shelf, and I took it down from the shelf and tried to make a longer screenplay out of it because the story I wrote was a short, 20 pages or whatever. And then I tried to make a feature-length film out of it, and, I put it back on a shelf. I read it again after I picked it up off the shelf, and it was trash. It was garbage. I wasn't really a good screenwriter. So then the natural next step for me was to say, well, the story I still think has merit. So, do I have the chops to even attempt to write a novel? And it was my wife, actually, that kind of pushed me to get started writing it. And when I started to write it, it just kind of flowed out of me. And what was great about it, and I've talked about this before, when you're writing a screenplay, you're writing, with the idea of a camera lens being, a main factor. So you're kind of abbreviating things, and, you're also cutting things that may not be integral to what the video would look like. But in a novel, you really get a chance to go deep into all those characters, and that's what was missing from the screenplay element of it, in my opinion, was that there was no depth really that I was able to be satisfied with.
Right, because with a film, you have to let the camera do as much as the exposition as possible, and let that fill the viewer or the audience into what's happening in the scene. Because otherwise, if you just exposit it through the dialogue, it just gets bogged down like a Christopher Nolan film or something.
Yeah, exactly. And all due respect to Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. He makes a great film. It's visually appealing, a great story, but there's a lot of exposition, and you have to be careful about that with film. Whereas with a book, you let the narrative fill in that expositional background.
Correct. I'm no Kevin Smith or Aaron Sorkin when it comes to those types of storytelling either. So, dialogue cannot drive the story. It's got to be a lot more than that.
Which is funny that you mentioned Kevin Smith. That kind of starts segueing into the next question of your inspirations as a writer, because obviously you draw from film and stuff like that. But it's funny that you mentioned Kevin Smith because you're both New Jersey natives. Mm-hmm. What are some of your inspirations?
Sorry, I actually live in a neighboring town to where he became Kevin Smith. I'm within a mile of his store called The Secret Stash, and they actually sell my book on the counter in The Secret Stash. It was a big coup de grace for myself. I went in there with a bunch of books. I met with Ming Chen, who's a very famous podcaster. I think he's more locally famous, but he's still pretty well known. He was on that television show with Kevin Smith. I'm blanking on the name of it. But he was one of the main characters there, so he's become pretty famous. I bumped into him at a ShopRite, and we just started talking, and so I'm in the right town.
Yeah, you are, clearly.
But yeah, he as a filmmaker, he was an inspiration because he was somebody who just didn't take no for an answer and said he was going to tell his story his way. Mm-hmm. And he persevered that way. Now, unfortunately, I didn't live up to his perseverance in the filmmaking world, but it kind of did make an impact on me to say, okay, just tell the story you want to tell. And if they don't want to read it, then that's on them. And that's kind of been something that's been sticking with me through the years. Just tell the story you want. Don't tell the story people want to hear. And if it's a good story, people will listen to it and they'll want more of it. And if it's not a good story, then they're not going to. And you have to be able to accept that also.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that a lot of writers, I think, miss, because they become apologetic about what it is that they're writing. If they write something that they feel is going to cross a line, they start second guessing it. They kind of neuter the story in trying to make it more appealing to a general audience. It's like, no, you're not writing for a general audience. You're writing for an audience that you think would be interested in the story. And so, the fact that you went in, and I mean, this, no pun intended, this book is, you go into it guns blazing, and it's really just it's a fun roller coaster. I mean, I read through it. Well, I listened to it on Audible. You had a fantastic narrator on it, and it was a fun listen to during the late winter, early spring, because I'm sitting there. I was doing a lot of driving for my job, and I was listening to it, and it was great to have that going, because it was very energetic. There's something very frenetic about the story. Very high energy and high octane, and that's really good, because sometimes books that have that kind of atmosphere, they aren't as fast paced, and yours really just kind of jumps right in, and that's fun.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, the narrator, Patrick Boylan, he just did a phenomenal job. And just as well as anybody, there's a lot of different characters and dialects that he mastered on his own. Like, he got no outside help. He didn't hire a friend to do it with. Like, he was every character, and he really brought the words to life. So I'm happy to hear that you enjoyed it, and he's just fantastic. I'm looking forward to working with him again. Yeah,
absolutely. So you've got Legends of the Circle coming out. That's the next installment in the series. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that?
I always wonder how much I can divulge about what Legends is about. But I'm very well, and you know more about Legends than most other people out there. Legends is not a sequel. It does not follow our main character from the Circle. So it predates his initiation to the Circle, and in fact, it is entirely based on something that I asked myself as I was I've read my own books so many different times in the editing process, and just as well as I do. There was a burning question that I could never really answer in the original book. The Circle isn't why are the rules what the rules are. So the rules of the Circle are really what gets talked about, and the consequences for breaking them and things like that. So I had so much fun writing this book, for a number of reasons. This whole second book, Legends, was based entirely on one chapter that was cut out of the Circle. This was not a fight, I shouldn't say fight. My editor and I, when you have a good editor that you work with and you trust, you can have these discussions. I wrote this chapter, and she said, it's a great chapter. It just doesn't work for this story. So reluctantly, I took it out, and I'm so thrilled that I did, because if I don't take that chapter out, then maybe Legends doesn't exist in the way it does. So from that one chapter, spawned this entire 108,000 words that are now currently being edited story. So it follows several characters in the spawning the decades from the late 50s up until present time, and how the Circle formed and how it formed them and how they influenced the Circle as well. And I just had a great time writing it.
It's good to be able to give that kind of history without it watering down what you've already created. You're giving. Well,
thank you. Yeah, that's a concern, because anybody that reads the Circle alone has these questions. What is it that got the Circle started? And then, like a lot of and I hate to draw back to the Marvel movies, but these Marvel movies all have these origin stories. Everybody wants to know how something gets started. Everybody loves being dropped into the middle of things and dealing with what's happening. And that's a great way to read a book and to be a part of a movie, anything like that. But to know how it started after that fact, to write a prequel after the original book, I thought was, it was just something that I feel like a lot more people would be interested in. Yes, they want to hear Doug's story, and they want to hear how he continues on. But I feel like the Circle itself is its own entity that needs, a history book, and this is the closest thing I can come to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I completely agree with that. As I've been going through working on book 5 in my series, I started having some ideas for a prequel, that takes place years before the events of the prologue of book 1. So I'm like, oh, that could be so much fun.
We get to see what Menenias was really like.
Yes, yes. So my next question for you is, because you're not originally a writer by trade, you did film and now you're teaching. What has been one of the hardest parts or the biggest challenges just in writing and creating this series that you're putting together?
Well, I think there's different stages, right? There's that first book that you write, and I only have really one to deal with. I don't have a second book out there. So when it was time to put this book out into the world, there was that unbelievable fear that it was going to be widely rejected by everyone. And, when I finally did publish it, it was more of a bucket list thing. I didn't think it was going to do anything more than just satisfy a bucket list that I could say I wrote this book. Now that it's taken off, it actually, the fears are different, because not only has it been, received, but then there's the fear of, can I ever write something again that is, enjoyable, so there's that element of it. But now, when you step back further than that, there's that imposter syndrome that every author goes through. Do I have the right to call myself an author? I've written one book that's gotten, no major, support from anybody other than, indie authors like ourselves and the promotions we get through our friends and on social media. So, do I have the right to call myself an author? And, do I put myself up there with the names like Samantha Downing or, the Stephen Kings of the world, and I will never put myself in that category, but I have a published book that has, numbers of, reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and it's won awards. So I can maybe put that down for a minute, but then come back to, it only gets put down for a minute and you come right back to it, because I'm still not that person. So that's tough to deal with too.
Well, I think having that feeling allows you the opportunity to, really strive to be better than you were before. Because even the first run, even as good as a first book can be, you're still going to have those moments where you're like, I could have done this just a little bit better. Let's see what I can improve on the next entry in the series. And for me, I can honestly say I've never really dealt with the full impact of imposter syndrome personally, but I have dealt with the self-doubt where I'm like, maybe I should just give up. I'm not doing very well with this. People say they're going to read it and then they don't, and it goes onto a to be read pile for the next century. Or
I've posted about that on Instagram. The amount of people that have my book currently, they say they're going to read it within a few months, and they just don't. And I totally get that. It's because, and I try to empathize with them out there, and I thank them all for being interested in the first place. And I'm not begrudging any of them, because these people that we're sending books to, we're not the only ones sending books to. Dozens of other authors are sending books to them. So you really got to compete with the publishers that are sending books to them. And then the little old me's out there that don't have a publishing house backing us, that are going to, you have to select my book over the new so-and-so book out there, the new Riley Sager, the new Samantha Downing book. No, you're not going to select mine over them. Yeah. But maybe when you do pick it up and you like it, hopefully you like it, and then you spread the word about it, then maybe one other person will move my book to the top of that list. And it's
Absolutely.
Just difficult. The independent publishing world is difficult.
It is. It's a big challenge, but at the same time, it's because I think we are not, because we're in that indie realm, we have the opportunity to have the backing from close friends and family who are like, okay, well, you still have our support. We still love you. Whether you succeed or fail at this, you still put something out there, and that's awesome.
Right. And I have no illusions that I'm going to be doing this for a career. This is clearly, it's I don't want to call it a hobby, because once I call it a hobby, then I'm not taking it as seriously. But it's definitely not something that's going to pay any bills. But it is something that I enjoy. And as long as people continue to receive the work that I'm doing, I'm going to continue to put it out there. The short story that I put out there, I hope that brought somebody something, as a way to tide them over until the next book comes out. And, you and I have talked about a number of different directions my short stories have gone. In fact, you predicted one of them, so you know where one of them's going. But it's little things like that just keep you in the public eye, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And with you, you and I both work in education, and the nice thing about that is that when our students see that we have put ourselves out there. We've gone through this process of publishing something. I think it encourages them to say that, hey, just because this person's a math teacher, that doesn't mean that they can't be an author. Or just because this person has done, X, Y, and Z doesn't mean they can't do something creative. It allows them to see that there are possibilities in whichever route they want to take with their lives.
Right. No one fits in exactly one column. Me being a math teacher and me being an author are two very different columns that I fit in. The language arts teachers in my school are like, really, the math teacher wrote a book? And now, so that was a bit of a joke when it first came out. Like, the math teacher wrote a book and I just sit around and I don't do anything. So the students had a fun time ragging on the English teachers for a few days.
This isn't Russia.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So last question. If you could give any advice for other would-be authors out there, what would you say to them?
It's just to keep writing. Keep writing. If you believe in your story and you keep at it, that will show through when you have a finished product. But make sure you have a finished product. Don't stop because of life. Life is going to get in your way. That is a fact. But don't ever stop completely. Put it down and come back to it. Put it down and come back to it. Because if the story is worth telling, then it's worth being told right. And the only person who could tell that story correctly is you. So tell that story the way you want to tell it and put it out there. That's my advice.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you coming on the show. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's good talking with you too, Garrett.
All right. A big thank you goes out to Stephen J. Galgon for his participation in this author awareness interview. Now, if you're interested in following him on social media, all of those connections are linked down below. If you want to get yourself a copy of his book, The Circle, you can find it on Kindle, paperback, and on Audible through Amazon. You made it all the way to the end. And given the subject matter of The Circle, that's pretty damn awesome. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe because that is how this channel is going to be able to grow its viewership. Remember to sign up as a channel supporter by heading over to patreon.com/GKJ Publishing, where you'll have access to 4 support tiers of $1, $3, $5, and $20. Each tier comes with access to my blooper reel, sweet tier level perks, and special promotions. Right now, the first 20 new patrons will receive a promo code that can be used to download my new audiobook from Audible. You can also check out my merch store on Teespring, where you can find finely crafted men's and women's t-shirts, phone cases, a hoodie, and more. When you hit up the merch store, make sure to post a pic to Instagram and Twitter of you wearing or holding the item and tagging me at GKJ_publishing with the hashtag 5Kingdoms merch. I would love to feature one of your picks in a future video. That's it for me. I'll see you guys back here next week for Creators Corner, where I will be discussing tips for naming your characters. Thanks for watching. The vlog of the 5 Kingdoms is filmed without the use of a live audience at Skyrocket Studios in Hanford, California. We can't do what we do without your help, so please make sure to subscribe by clicking the button that's above my head, and make sure to watch and share the videos over here to my left. Have a great week.